Welcome, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and of course, another episode of the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics: electricity, EVs, solar, whatever. And my guest today is Ben Pauluhn. I'll say Italiano, Pauluhn. I don't know if that works, but Ben Pauluhn. And he is with, or he is, are you? You not with, it's your company, right?
It
Optimus?
is, but let's separate the identities, both for protection of all parties.
Yeah, it's something that I keep thinking of Optimus Prime. Was that part of your mojo when you came up with the name, or?
No, not at all. But I dodged a bullet because pre-COVID we were going to open a co-working space where we were going to take part of it, and we were looking at two different. Um, so it was going to be, haha, Optimus Energy at Prime Commons, but
Ah,
fortunately we did not pull the trigger on those prior to 2020.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just for full disclosure, everybody, um, Ben and his company, Optimus Energy Solutions, did put the solar panels on my house in Orlando. So that was a couple of years ago, almost 2 full years, 2.5 years. I'm not receiving anything. Ben's not receiving anything other than the incredibly small publicity of being on my platform. Um, and so, when did Optimus start, and why did you start it? What was the thinking?
Started in 2018. The thinking was very scientific in that I had stopped my executive job in 2017 when we had our first kid and was looking for something and find solar and electrification fascinating. And I thought, well, definitely starting my own company will give me more time with my growing family. And so obviously, 7, 8 years on now, here we find ourselves. We started in Mount Dora, just north of Orlando in 2018, and we press ahead.
And everyone who's listened to my show for a while, every once in a while, I'll talk about solar panels. And I did an episode. I wish I knew the number, but I did an episode on how to buy solar, and I went through all the steps of how I put out requests for bids, and I had multiple people come and visit the house and tell me, "Oh, your house is so beautiful. Don't kiss my ass. Don't flatter me. Just give me a quote." The email I sent to you, you responded back with something like, "I get it, man. You just want the numbers," and you shot me a fair quote, um, and the pamphlets and all the detail I could read at my leisure. But you didn't send anyone to sit in my house for an hour that I couldn't get rid of. So if I never made that clear, thank you. That was a real delightful way to do business. You guys are now doing EV charging stuff. What's going on there?
Yeah, very, very interesting. Like I said, we have a real interest, fascination with electrification overall. And about half of our revenue now is electric vehicle charging infrastructure throughout the Southeast. So half of it remains solar. We love it. Doing some very interesting, in our book, commercial solar initiatives that we can talk about if desired.
Yeah.
But yes, we sort of traditionally sell and install EV chargers for other people, whomever auto dealership comes to us. But then we also are aggressively rolling out our own EV chargers throughout the Southeast that we own and operate as a service to drivers.
And that's something you can make money doing, right? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, that's what I told my wife, but the time will tell. We
Yeah.
believe because of our partnerships that yes, we can bring a quality product to market that is A, reliable, because that's what people care about the most,
Yeah.
and B, is fair market rate billing. And just by doing those two things at a cost basis, you know, installing and owning EV chargers is very interesting because it's one of the few businesses I've ever seen where you don't control your own revenue. Once I put a device out there, I have very few mechanisms by which to independently drive business to that device. And so you're at the whims of the market. So we try to control our capital expenses. We try to be good operators. And we got into that business, Phil, from a bottom up. We were talking to a lot of clients. Hey, we'd love these chargers. We don't have $50,000. We don't have $100,000. And we thought, well, we believe in this sector. We ultimately, our thesis, if you will, which is too fancy of a word for us, is that in America, right, wrong, good, bad, the consumer generally wins over
Yeah.
time. and electrification from a pure consumer market is safer, quieter, more attractive, better acceleration. People don't have to agree with me, but that's just how the numbers bear out. And so you see, whatever 50, 60,000 units a month rolling off the line, and those people ultimately have to have a place to fuel up.
Yeah, absolutely. Technical question, maybe. What type of hardware are you using? Is it charge point equipment? Is that what I saw?
It is, and we made a decision early on, if based in two, again, very scientific things. Number one, our customers generally don't know what they're buying anyway. Going back
Yeah.
to how you started with solar, I think that can apply there. The title of the solar thing can easily be, how not to get screwed by doing solar as well. It
Yeah.
could have been a similar title, but clients don't know what they're buying, and so we do use ChargePoint, and we very appropriately, maybe somewhat unkindly, but I tell them the same way. We perceive and we believe very strongly that ChargePoint is the least broken solution in what has been over time a somewhat broken market. Infrastructure has been unreliable, which has discouraged people from buying electric vehicles, adopting EVs. And ChargePoint has performed very well for us. Of course, everything's lumpy. Any relationship is lumpy, but we exclusively use them, and we're glad to do so. Been a wonderful partner.
So I would assume, without knowing fully, and correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm learning, and maybe the listeners, the viewers, can learn as we go. My experience with charge point charging stations has always been excellent. They just fucking work. I've got the ChargePoint app. At one point, I had a little card. They may still do that. A lot of the machines you can tap your credit card if you don't have an account set up. So I'm assuming, since you're buying the ChargePoint hardware, that you're using, I guess, what the back end, that their
Yeah, we
charging
use
technology.
that's right, and that's why we use it, because it works and drivers can rely on it. The other thing is, because they've been, they kind of, I think, appropriately say they're, I think, 15, 16-year-old company and probably an 8-year-old market at this stage.
Yeah.
They're integrated into all the dash, well, not all, the vast majority of dash. So you get into a Mercedes, you get into a Ford, you get into a Volkswagen, you'll pull up the charge point stations on the dash. So you have multiple avenues to find that device. And we do currently use their back end. There's a lot of folks in this industry that have tried to, and to varying degrees of success, develop their own, we'll say, back end
Yeah.
to keep the terminology. We ask the question, for what value, right? I mean, how many grocery shopping apps can one have? How many, whatever apps, how many EV charging apps can one have? Well, you probably have 4, right? You probably, if you drive a
Yeah.
Tesla, you obviously have a Tesla. You have Tesla app, and you have the nav that goes along with that. You have ChargePoint, Electrify America, probably EVgo. There are others, and there are some other good ones.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, how many of the options at Golden Corral can you eat in one sitting?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I think it was just recently Sizzler added, I think it was a Tesla station with something like 40 chargers. And their idea, of course, is Teslas don't charge as fast as some newer 800-volt cars, but it's a perfect operation for a restaurant, because you're going to sit there 30, 40 minutes. You go inside and you have a meal. It's perfect. What kind of capacity are you putting in? 250 kilowatt towers? Or are you going up to 400 yet?
So we try to match the type of charging infrastructure to the dwell time of the location where we're putting it. So, for example, if we're going into a QSR, we're doing a number of quick serve restaurants throughout Georgia, Alabama corridors.
Yeah.
We'll try to match a 20 to 33-minute charge time, because generally that's the time that someone's going to be there. And so we don't focus so much on going higher power, higher power, higher power, for a few reasons. One, you want the customer experience to be best. So if they charge in 10 minutes, but they want to be somewhere for 25 or 30 minutes, that's actually a net negative, because then they're going to get idle fees.
Yeah.
The other thing is once one makes that jump, and Tesla knew this early on. They must be given credit for so many of the things that they pushed the envelope early on.
Indeed.
Is you put out, it sounds great to put out a 400 kW charger, but then you go up by 2 to 3 orders of magnitude in cost. You go up in an order of magnitude for your demand fees with the utility, and all of a sudden you have a non-economic or an uneconomical project where you've got stranded capital, stranded electrical capacity, a 1.5 year wait for a transformer that you really don't need to begin with. And so there's always a balance. Obviously a turnpike stop is going to be necessarily different than a hotel. So we try to match dwell time with power output.
Because honestly, at a hotel, you could have a DC fast charger that's 25 kilowatt,
Yeah,
because I'm going to put it in
exactly.
overnight, and it doesn't, even,
Yeah, in the hotel stuff, we would just do a level two,
yeah, yeah,
type experience because you have the longer dwell time in hotels, office space, apartment communities, et cetera. And so just match the customer experience to where they are.
how many ports, how many charging connectors do you have active right now?
Yeah, right now we have a few hundred level twos, which is nothing, to write home about. We're currently building 200 DC fast plugs from Central Florida up through the Carolinas, Georgia, and Alabama. We have a partnership with GM Energy, which is General Motors, where we are aggressively rolling out charger volume, the DC fast charger volume in 2025.
Right.
And we're also in the process, it's not inked. Also in the process, should be inked in the next week. Should have been a week and a half ago without attorneys, but we won't go into an attorney podcast.
Yeah.
Uh, with a large utility where we're taking over their portfolio of DC fast chargers in the Southeast, which we're really excited about, keeping the continuity of that service. Because
Yeah. Are
once
you able to
people,
name that utility?
yes, it's Duke.
Okay, I was gonna
It's Duke.
guess.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know. I don't know if I can, but Duke's been a wonderful partner for Optimus, both on the solar and the EV charging side.
Yeah.
We've participated in events with them. They have worked with us as an investor-owned utility. We actually do some contracting directly with them on some battery backup pilots that they're doing. So nothing but and early on with Optimus, we chose a different tact. Utility relationships can be fraught
Yeah.
in the distributed energy space. Let's just be honest. But really, utilities hold such prominence in society that why fight about it? We had an old college coach that said never get into pissing contests with a skunk.
Yeah.
And why fight when one can find ways to work together, and that has proven very fruitful because the utilities that we've worked with have really been good partners.
Because it sure seemed like, from my perspective, Duke was trying. It just wasn't clicking for some reason. I don't know what's their relationship with EV Connect, if they're taking some of the Duke equipment and you're taking some of the other Duke equipment locations. Um, but Florida Power and Light, they're fucking crushing it. I mean, their equipment
You know,
is everywhere. It works every time. But Duke,
well,
man,
and this is a self-serving comment, but part of the reason it works is we Optimus, ironically, because you brought up FP&L, does all of the warranty work for the charge point chargers that FP&L owns. So our service technicians go and do most, all is probably misrepresentation, a large portion of that warranty work. And something goes wrong, they dispatch FP&L and ChargePoint, fix it through us, and it's back up and running. And that I would second that. That has been a positive experience when most of our fleet is operated on electric, and when our guys are traveling throughout the state, we can generally rely on that infrastructure vis-a-vis some others that I won't go
yeah.
into
Well,
naming.
not only because it's FPL, but 95, I-95 going down the east coast of Florida. Now there's chargers everywhere. And Miami is just insane, the number of chargers that are there. The thing that's driven me nuts is 75 from Orlando to Valdosta. When I first drove down in my Bolt, I just did a segment on this. There was two places for me to charge, and
Mhm.
both are Electrify America. One of them is historically iffy. It worked the day we stopped there. Now there's like 7 CCS locations. There's 14 Tesla locations in that stretch. So now I have, because my car can now use Tesla as well. While it's not that fast, I have 21 places I can charge in that stretch of road versus 2 from just 3 years ago. Are you planning on adding anything on 75 that I don't know about yet?
Yes, we are, but ours are deeper into Georgia. The ones that we're building
Okay.
right now,
Okay.
they're not. Excuse me, they're not in Florida. But I think, Phil, that kind of parlays a little bit back to the comment I was making about the American consumer and charging infrastructure, et cetera. And the general experience of these users overall is so positive, yet and you see, like you said, well, Miami's got chargers everywhere. Yes, Florida has the second highest EV adoption behind California.
Yep.
And I mean, even this is a funny stat that I wouldn't have guessed. Orange County, Florida, has a higher rate of adoption than the state of California
Yeah,
of
they're everywhere.
electrification. And we're going to need somewhere in the order of 25 to 30x the amount of charging infrastructure that we have today.
Yeah.
Number one, that's beautiful for America because we're putting in our own infrastructure that's distributing our own kilowatt hours that we are consuming, owning, operating, maintaining, and it's ultimately beautiful for the safety of transport, and all of the things downstream that happen with electrification.
And the thing that people they focus on this one little thing about the charge time, but they forget the charge time at home, which is next to zero. You just plug it in and forget it. You go to bed. Um, but you can put electric chargers in all kinds of places you could never put gasoline, like in a Wendy's parking lot, in a supermarket parking lot. You can put chargers inside, not just a parking garage, but inside a building. Not so much of a problem here, but in the extreme north, you put them inside and you have a big roller door that goes up. Your car pulls in. You're in a heated environment inside. And like you mentioned, these quick service restaurants, fast food, I would call them. Quick service sounds very, very chic.
Yes, very yes, highfalutin. Yes.
Yeah. What is the Waffle House is putting these in? Starbucks are putting them in. They're just going everywhere because all of these retailers want customers. And this is a way to not only bring a customer, but to have them sit there in a high speed charging car for 10, 15 minutes, something slower for 30 to 40 minutes. And maybe they make a few pennies per kilowatt hour of the electricity, but they're really making the money when you go in the store, just like a gas station does. You pull up in this giant gas station, they're making pennies per gallon, and they make real money when you go in and buy a $4 monster. Does that all sound right?
It does. It does. And I don't argue with any of those points. We just focus a little bit differently than the traditional, what I would say, what has become maybe pejorative talking points, even though they're not pejorative. I mean, nothing that you said should be remotely controversial.
Yeah.
It's there's an obsession with the tail use cases of almost any technology, and that's been the same with electrification of transport. Of course, trains aren't perfect for everything, but darn it, that bright line's been a game changer for my business in South Florida, right? So let the market roll out options that people desire, and people will ultimately vote. And the few little tail cases where electrification isn't good for X, Y, or Z because the use case isn't there yet, we don't even really focus on charge time per se. The use of these vehicles is such a boon for a lack of maintenance. I mean, throughout our fleet, we have almost zero downtime, right? You've got to change tires, of course. You have zero valves, gaskets. You need a lot less internal mechanical knowledge as a non-mechanical business to maintain one's fleet. Like you said, you show up every day, the cars are full, so the guys aren't
Right.
going to a racetrack and spending $12 and spending 17 minutes just because. Yeah, just examples. I'm guilty of that
Yeah.
too. You can't just accuse our guys of doing it.
That's
So you have all of these sort of life cycle benefits, and it ties in so beautifully with the trend towards distributed energy generation. And we're not a big enough player to claim any meaningful market moving by orders of magnitude. However, distributed energy generation is working. America, to a large extent, through our cities, counties, and we've got some wonderful partners. We work with like 20 cities and counties in Florida, but we've largely neutered ourselves through the permitting, zoning, regulatory process to roll out infrastructure quickly and at scale. And so building these large energy generation facilities has been, we've done it to ourselves. We have no one to blame but ourselves. We have to look in the mirror, and we have to be, if we were honest about that, we'd be a lot further ahead as a society. But setting that aside, distributed generation also works because you can roll it out quickly and at scale. And so when you're rolling out distributed generation resources, like we're doing a number of really neat floating solar arrays with a
that was
partner
on my
called
list to ask you. Yeah.
D3 Energy out of Miami. Um, and these things are large. They're megawatts of power. They're on previous liabilities that now people are turning into assets that were just dead liabilities, and now it's an income and power producing asset. And it's existing grid infrastructure. It's where people are using power and consuming power, needing power. Transformers are generally already in place. Distribution lines are in place. I mean, what a boon for the overall grid, for the consumer, for businesses. One of America's great benefits to companies over the last couple of decades has been the relative cost of power. And we have to build out generation at scale in order to keep that trend.
Absolutely. I want to circle back. You dropped the name Brightline. You and I know that because we're in Central Florida, but it's a high-speed rail train that goes from Orlando to Miami, and they have dreams of extending it to different places. Absolutely fantastic. You go buy your ticket, you sit on the train, and boom, you're in Miami. And a portion of the time it would take you to drive because it's pretty far. And the distributed power, of course, you're talking about having more places that produce power and not just relying on one nuclear power plant or five coal power plants. You have electricity coming from everywhere, which is actually a big perk for some place like Florida, because if a transmission line goes down near the power plant, everybody's out, or it could be thousands or millions of people are out. But if the power is here and there and everywhere, I am curious about this floating thing. Is it really floating? Is it just above the water on
It's
foundation?
100% floating on floats. Of course, there are tethers,
Yeah.
that keep it down for storms, but it's absolutely floats. The floats are made in America and out of France with a French company, and the technology works. It
Yeah.
keeps and there's just like my love for electrified transport. There's so many second and third order benefits. So you're over the water, so it keeps the panels materially cooler, which helps with production.
Yeah.
People don't realize once you get those solar panels above 78, 80 degrees, production starts to degrade. And so that helps, keeps, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah. I was just going to insert. I was talking to somebody and they go, so when it's 90 outside, the solar panels might produce 4, 5, 8% less, depending on the specific solar panel. And I said, no, it's not the air temperature. It's the temperature of the panel. And so if it's 90 degrees outside and you've got full sun on relatively black panels, they're going to get materially hotter uh, than the ambient air. Just the same reason we use passive water heating for pools in Florida. The other thing, of course, on the house, in a way, since the panels get hot and there's a little gap of air between the panel and the roof, it keeps the roof and the house cooler. You can actually save a little bit on energy. And the same thing, I'm assuming applies with the lake. The cool water keeps the panels cool, like you said, but the panels also help keep the water cool. And so as we have global warming and higher average temperatures, maybe that keeps the lake from not spiking as much. Is that in effect
It
at all?
it certainly helps with two important things. One, it helps with evaporation, so it reduces evaporation from these
Yeah.
ponds. And secondly, it helps control a lot of invasive vegetative growth because that sunlight's no longer hitting the bottom of these man-made ponds, and
Yeah.
so it's a lot less chemical use, a lot less treatment, a lot less manpower on what is just kind of a repetitive, I would say over time, not high value add task. And all of those themes tie into why Optimus loves what we do, which is all these assets that we have the privilege of rolling out have second, third, fourth order benefits overall. That's not the reason that one is doing it. It's just like my negative obsession with legislating for purpose A, but trying to solve problem B while you're legislating for purpose A.
Yeah.
However, with distributed energy, with electrified transport, there are these natural downstream benefits that get us really excited about the long-term value proposition, long-term cost savings that is real.
Absolutely. Have you yet tried on land to grow crops under solar panels? Have you been involved with that yet?
Very, very common in lower wind zones than Florida and very successful. A lot of the semi-translucent panels are good for that. A lot of crops one can grow under that. Slight slightly larger challenge in Florida just because of wind codes and wind loading, you know, appropriately. That's not
Yeah.
an anti-code
Yeah.
thing. It's just, you know, with wind,
You
it
don't want them
becomes
in
more
the air.
challenging. Ideally, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. I know in the past, you had an electric vehicle, I think an EV6. Are you still rocking the EV6 or have you tried something else?
Still rocking the EV6. We operate Chevy, Ford, Tesla, Kia, as a company. I think those are the brands right now in our electrified fleet.
So
And you know,
these
I
are
went I
service vehicles or
but no service, yeah, service installation. So you know, light F-150 Lightnings for installation, Bolts and Teslas for service, Kias for sales and client facing things. So runs up and down the gamut.
and you said earlier, I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. Less downtime, less repairs, less maintenance costs on all these electric vehicles in your fleet. Is that the case?
I mean, with both quantitatively, empirically, and anecdotally.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, of the electric vehicles that we run, except for doing you know, pushing software updates and having the standard mechanical things of tire changes, rotations.
Right.
There's zero. We have had zero downtime in our fleet vis-a-vis the, you know, the internal combustion. You know, got one in the shop now for whatever gaskets and transmission and these sorts of things. So from a pure business operation, that doesn't always matter if it's an individual, right? You don't see that necessarily as an individual consumer. You may over
Right.
time, but it doesn't really move the needle. But when one is doing it at scale with dozens, hundreds, thousands of vehicles, the you know, accretive thing to the bottom line is meaningful.
Well, I was just thinking, I don't know if I really thought about this before, but in a prior life, many years ago, I was involved with the trucking and home delivery of appliances, furniture, stuff like that. And sometimes you have big warehouses where the trucks come in and load, so they're enclosed. Um, and you got to drive the truck in, you got to drive the truck out. And sometimes people don't turn off the truck right away. So you're filling this place with the smell of diesel. And every driver, as soon as they get their truck loaded, they start the truck, they drive out, they go a mile or two to their favorite gas station, whatever it is. You mentioned Road Ranger, but Quick Trip, Pilot, Flying J, doesn't matter. They pull in and they go get breakfast. And, you know, I can't say that I blame them. They're going to be out on the road all day, probably, but there's 20, 30, 40 minutes as an employer, as a service provider, as a distribution provider, where your crews can just hop in the trucks. They can even be parked inside and charging right at the dock, and they just hop in the morning and they go.
And if you
Phenomenal.
roll out solar on your facility, you're paying yourself for that fuel versus paying a third party for that fuel.
Yeah.
You get especially with the medium size, you know, the small delivery stuff. You get the regenerative braking is a big deal where you're
Mhm.
capturing that energy that otherwise one is losing. You just see money going out the window when you see these guys accelerate and hit the brakes. And so it's just a bottom line exercise, and it's a quality of life. It's, you know, like, I'll give you a good example. The electrification of buses has gotten a bad name, probably because of some of the public monies that were thrown at it that some people deemed irresponsible. We could have a side conversation about whether some was or wasn't.
Yeah.
But when I look at an application like that, I think it's perfect. Do I want my
Absolutely.
kid sitting at a bus stop with an idling bus 3-4 minutes a day sucking that stuff in, or do I want him to be able to talk to his friends, talk to his parents, get on the bus safely because there's not that noise, and not have those point of exhaust fumes? Really, it's a no-brainer. Of course, things come down to cost, but then when you look at the cost to operate these things, especially for cities, take Orlando where we are, where they own and operate their own utility, right? So now they're paying themselves for that fuel versus trucking it in from out of state. You start to get into these you know, virtuous cycles that really matter.
Absolutely. And the same thing applies to postal deliveries, the mail trucks. Absolutely no reason for those to use gasoline anymore. That's ridiculous. Uh, Delivery companies like Amazon and FedEx, they're figuring this out. They're changing their fleets over. And you can have a mixed fleet too. So if you have a truck that, you know, leaves Orlando and goes to Jacksonville every day and then back, and you don't want to have a limited range on the electric vehicle, okay, that's a gasoline one. I once had someone ask me and said, Phil, I'm looking at this electric truck, like an F-150 that you mentioned. And they said, but if I pull a horse trailer, it's going to cut my range in half. And I said, well, how often are you pulling a horse trailer? And they said, well, never. I don't have any horses. And I was like, well, shut the fuck up. Why are you bringing up a scenario that doesn't apply to you? And as you said in the beginning, there's right equipment for every scenario. And
One
that,
of and that's right. And what I find day in and day out is so many of those conversations, unfortunately, in America, we've politicized nearly every talking point, and they emanate not from a point of critical thought, but from a point of a political position. And everything from a consumption basis should ideally be fit for purpose. And so, what we are really looking to do is give people and businesses products and services that are fit for their purpose, both economically and functionally. End of discussion.
absolutely. I think that I'm going to wrap up here. Again, it's Optimus Energy Solutions, and the website is optimusenergysolutions.com, right? That's
That is correct, sir.
all smushed together, a lot of letters, but you can Google it and find it. Um, they can install solar on your house. You still doing that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Commercial solar, installing EV charging equipment of different types, the plenty of level twos, but now they're getting up to the big boy stuff. So if you own a restaurant, a store, anything where you want customers and you want another way to get customers, because that's one of the hardest things in every business. How do I get customers? Well, you put this in your parking lot and they just show up. And they're there for a little bit of time and they come in and they use your services. Anything else? Oh, and the floating solar, anything else big like that you guys are doing that we haven't talked about yet that we can throw in before we wrap up?
No, we touched on all of it. We just feel very fortunate to be in something that we enjoy, in something that we perceive to be good for consumers, good for businesses, good for the country, and we're excited about building the stuff. And I think that's a big part of it because construction is, as many of us know, is not easy, and
Yeah,
so you really have one has to have an excitement about it. So I appreciate you having me on today.
it's not a problem. Ben, thank you so much for being on the Phil Ferguson Show.